Today I am going to provide a presentation on ADR, what is it, and what do I need to do. There are just a few notes I'd like to go over first. All participants will be placed on mute during the presentation. Once the presentation is complete, participants will be able to ask questions. This presentation is being recorded, and a link to the recording will be posted on the intranet.
Laura, if you could speak up just a tad.
Okay. All right, ADR. ADR stands for Additional Development Request. Now, there's a lot of confusion in reference to an ADR. First, I'd like everyone to understand that an ADR is not a denial. An ADR is simply a request for additional documentation to make a coverage determination. A MAC, or a Medicare Administrative Contractor, can request an ADR before paying a claim. This is called a prepay review, or after paying a claim, and this is called a post-pay review. Now, an example of a prepay review would be something that everybody is currently going through, and that is the manual medical review process, the therapy pre-approval. If, for example, you provide therapy to a patient over the threshold and you do not have pre-approval to do so, and that claim is billed to Medicare, you will receive an ADR. That ADR would be considered a prepay review because you're being requested to send in documents before being paid for your services. Now, an example of a post-pay review would be a random audit that Medicare does, and they can do that 6 months after the claim or a year after the claim. But at any rate, you've already been paid for those services, and that is why it is called a post-pay review. Now, there are a lot of reasons why you would receive an ADR. The 3 reasons that I have placed on this presentation are the 3 main reasons that you would receive an ADR. So the first one is when Medicare cannot make a coverage or coding determination from the information that has been provided on a claim, they will have to ask for additional documentation. An example of this would be if you have a claim and the diagnosis codes on the claim are not part of the local coverage determination. In this case, the only way they can determine coverage would be to look at your documentation. A second reason that you could be receiving an ADR would be, as I had mentioned earlier, if a patient has exceeded the $3,700 threshold for any discipline on a claim without prior approval, then the entire claim will be placed in prepayment review. And the Medicare contractor will ask for additional documentation to determine if the services were medically reasonable and necessary to go over the $3,700 threshold. And lastly, and actually rather common these days, you could get an ADR simply because Medicare does conduct random audits of claims, and they will ask for additional documentation to determine if the services on the claim were accurately billed. And again, these are the 3 most common reasons that you would receive an ADR. Now, if I receive an ADR, what do I need to do? Well, the very first thing that you should do is to read and follow the instructions on the ADR letter. I cannot emphasize this enough, that if you read the instructions on the letter, they normally do provide step-by-step instructions as to what to do. So the first thing that you're going to do after reading the letter is you're going to submit the requested documentation to the Medicare Administrative Contractor. Please note it's extraordinarily important that you do so within the time frame on the letter. ADRs typically allow 30 days from the date on the request. However, the time frame is also on the letter. So if you cannot remember that you are allotted 30 days, it does state that on the letter. Very, very important. If you do not send your documentation within that 30-day time frame, it will result in a denied claim. And also very important is to make sure that when you're sending in the documentation that you verify the address that you are sending it to. And the address should be in the body of the letter. A few notes in reference to ADRs. Please remember that ADRs can be sent for both Medicare Part A claims and Medicare Part B claims. And what I mean by that is, if you are in a SNF in a skilled nursing facility and your facility receives an ADR for a Med A patient, then you would be instructed most likely by your facility as to gathering the rehab documents to provide to them so that they can send those to the MAC. A Medicare Part B claim is similar to what we've been getting lately with the manual medical review process when we go over the $3,700 threshold without prior approval. This is an example of an ADR for a Medicare Part B claim. Now, all ADRs will have maybe 1 or 2 or 3 disciplines on the claim. However, the ADR is for the entire claim. So even if you have a Medicare Part B ADR and one of those disciplines on the claim have a pre-approval authorization, you still have to submit documentation for that discipline. And I don't know how many of you have ever actually read one of those pre-approval letters that you get from the MAC, but near the bottom of the letter, it does let you know that contractors can review documentation at any time, regardless of its pre-approval. So the take-home point here, or the take-home message, is that anything on that claim, whether it's speech, PT, or OT, all documentation for each discipline must be part of your packet that you will be submitting to your Medicare Administrative Contractor. All right, so now that you've received your ADR, you kind of know the guidelines. You're going to want to know what to submit to your MAC. Now, some Medicare Administrative Contractors have a list of required documents to submit, and others do not. Follow the list provided by your MAC if they have one. If one is not available, then please follow the list that I've provided on this presentation. The first piece of paper that should be the first part of your packet would be the ADR cover sheet. Now, almost all the MACs have an ADR cover sheet. There are, I think, 1 or 2 that do not. But if one is provided by your MAC, please use that as the first page of your packet. Next, you will want a copy of the ADR letter. And this is extraordinarily important that you do have a copy of the ADR letter as part of your packet. Next, you would want justification letter or a statement of the skilled services and the need for these skilled services that you have provided to the patient. Now, once you've gathered this information, Next, you're going to want to have all the documentation for each discipline that is on the claim. So for each discipline, you're going to want to have the therapy pre-approval letter if they have one. If they do not have one, then obviously this would not be part of this discipline's documentation. Then you would want the orders for therapy. You'd want the evaluation, and the evaluation needs to be signed and dated by the physician. Next, you would want any recertifications from the start of care through the ADR period, and those also need to be signed and dated by the physician. You will also want 10th visit progress notes from start of care through the ADR period and daily notes for the ADR period only. So for example, if you have an ADR for a November claim, you're only going to provide daily notes for November. Next, you would provide service logs from start of care through the ADR period, electronic signature logs, and patient account summary. You will do this for every discipline on the claim. I suggest that you separate each discipline with a divider. The divider could be as simple as a plain piece of paper with the discipline's name on it, and then placing the documentation for that discipline underneath that divider. So if you have two disciplines, for example, on the claim, let's say it's occupational therapy and physical therapy, you would have a divider for occupational therapy and occupational therapy's documentation under that, and then you would have a divider for physical therapy and physical therapy's documentation under that. All right. Now that you've gathered all the documents needed to send to the MAC, you will now need to compile, you will now need to number the pages. I recommend that you number them one of the total. So for example, if you have 50 pages, then you would number them 1 of 50. The second page would be 2 of 50. The third page would be 3 of 50. Now, there are a lot of reasons for this, but the main reason is, number one, you are letting the representative know how many pages are total. And number two, if they were to get messed up, they would easily be able to put them back in the correct order. Next, you're going to want to make a copy of the packet. So please make the copy after all of the pages are numbered. You will want to retain this copy for your records. And I tell everyone to do this because later down the road, if for some reason the ADR actually is denied, you will want that packet for future appeals. You're going to mail the packet via certified mail to the address on the ADR letter. Now, I do ask everyone mail it certified mail because, number one, we can track certified mail. We know exactly when, meaning date and time, that the MAC has received the packet. I would like you to upload the certified mail receipt into SMART. And that way, it's safe, you know that it's there, and if you ever need it later, you don't have to search through your files to find it. Once you've done that, you need to email your ARM to enter the ADR information into the appeals management of SMART. This does a lot of things, but the main thing is it helps us to manage the ADR, and if it goes to a denial, then we could follow it through the denial process. Now, an ADR packet being completed for a SNF or a skilled nursing facility is slightly different. Number one, you'll have to obtain a copy of the ADR letter from the facility. You will also have to determine who will be assembling and mailing the ADR packet. If it's the rehab staff, then it's easier to keep track of the date and time and all that the document is actually being mailed. If it's the SNF staff, then you will want to gather information from the facility. Number one, you'll want to document the date and the date that the rehab records were provided to the facility. And this is very important that you keep this on your file somewhere. So for example, if you are notified of the ADR maybe 10 days after they've received it, and you turn around and give them the rehab documentation within just a couple of days, you've obviously given them what they need within the 30-day period of time. And they've had plenty of time then to get the packet out to the MAC. So it's important that you document that date in case it comes up later. Secondly, you're going to want to document the date the packet is actually mailed to the MAC by the facility, because this information you must actually enter into the appeals management of SMART. Now, if you are having regular communication with the billing department of your facility, then this is probably not a difficult process. If you do not have regular communication with the billing department of your facility, I recommend that you start that immediately. I recommend that you check with the billing department at least on a weekly basis and ask them if they've had any ADRs or denials or rejections. And Legacy actually has a form. It's a denials notification query log that makes it very simple to open this communication, this line of communication with your facility. All you have to do is go to the intranet downloads, go to denials management, and the name of the form is the denial notification query log. And you see the form. It's very simple. You as the rehab director would simply have to sign there. You'd have the business office manager sign below there, and then the business office manager would let you know if they've had any ADRs, any denials, or any rejections. They would simply have to say yes or no, and if you wanted to, you could write them if the answer is yes below that, and then you could date it. And if you did this every week, then you would be opening up that line of communication to make sure that anything that they need from you, that they are getting in a timely manner. Now, I have gotten a lot of calls lately asking how to send multiple ADR packets together. And here are my recommendations for doing so. You should place each packet in an 8.5 by 11 or a 9 by 12 envelope. This way it is separating each ADR from any other ADRs in the box when you send it. I recommend that you write the name of the patient on the front of the envelope, that you place all the envelopes in the box with the names facing up, and you provide a list of all the patients that are contained in the box, and that you place that list on the top of all the packets. That way, when the representative from the MAC opens up the box, that paper is on top and they can see exactly, number one, how many packets are in there and exactly which packets are in there. I know a lot of you have been getting ADRs over the last few weeks, and I have been getting a lot of questions. I have compiled a few questions what I call frequently asked questions that I've been getting over and over, whether it's on the phone or by email. And the first question I've been getting is, I know the ADR is due to not having pre-approval for PT to go over the threshold. The claim has speech therapy and occupational therapy on it as well. Since the ADR is due to physical therapy, do I still need to send in all the documentation for speech therapy and for occupational therapy? And the answer to that is yes, because remember the ADR is for the entire claim, regardless of why it has been triggered. And if you do not send in all of the documentation for each discipline on the claim, the whole entire claim can be denied. Another question I get is, since I discharged the patient during the time period in question, do I still have to send in the documentation? And the answer is yes, because the ADR is for the services that we have already rendered and that are showing up on the claim. Therefore, failure to submit the requested documentation to support those services will result in a denial of that claim. Another question I get is, well, I was very busy and unable to send in the packet within the 30-day time frame. It's only a few days late. Is that a problem? And the answer is yes, because actually failure to submit the packet within the time frame will result in a denial of the claim. Another question is, the evaluation was sent off to the physician for signature, and therefore I didn't have it to include it in the documentation I forwarded to the MAC. Is that a problem? And yes, actually, that is a problem because failure to submit all of the needed information to determine if the services were medically reasonable and necessary will result in a denial of the claim. Because remember, this is an ADR, which is asking for additional documentation to support the claim. And if you do not provide all of that documentation, they're not going to ask for more. They're simply going to deny that claim. Wow, that was quick. We have come to the end of the presentation, and I will now be able to take questions. I think we are going to, at this point, take everyone off mute.
Everyone should be unmuted now, so if you have a
Wonderful.
question, fire away.
Hello?
I do have a question, Audra.
Hey, Audra.
Yes, how do we upload anything into SMART? I've never done that before.
Actually, there are instructions on how to upload. I know perhaps your arm might be able to forward that to you, but if not, all you have to do is email me.
Okay.
My email address is lnicholson@legacyhealthcare.net, and I have that actually saved on my computer, and I can just forward that to you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Anybody else have a question? I've answered all of them in the presentation.
You're astounding.
Apparently. All righty then. Well, if nobody has any questions, this was a very, very quick call, and we'll go ahead and end it at this time.
Thanks, everybody, for your time. Thanks, Laura.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Anne, are you still there?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, I don't know how I did. I must have gotten like 5, I don't know who has been texting me, but I started wondering if there was something wrong.
Why?
I don't know. I have like 5 texts, and My family doesn't really text me, so I'll have to check and find out what they're about.
Oh,
So I started thinking maybe you were texting me or something.